Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, we are going to be talking about the massive correction that we have just seen on the S&P 500, the DJI, and of course, on Bitcoin. As you guys know, a corrective movement has come kind of out of nowhere on Bitcoin, and I want to share with you exactly why this has happened so that you can understand what is going on and what impacts this news is going to have on Bitcoin and on stocks over the rest of this year. This all starts with a Truth Social post that Donald Trump posted at approximately 11 a.m. this morning, attacking China by claiming that they've been attacking us. I'm going to read it all for you. We're going to break it down, and then we're going to talk about its impact on markets. So let's get a quick overview of what's going on, the concern, and then we're going to look at this Truth Social post, and then we're going to talk about the different impacts that this might have moving forward and whether or not this changes any of our trade plans. Newsflash, it does. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and dive right on into it. Bitcoin had been holding relatively strong at $120,000, but of course, about an hour ago, here around 11 a.m., we saw a sharp correction on Bitcoin. And this is the first thing I saw. And whenever you see something like this, you're pretty much guaranteed that there's some kind of news behind it, because Bitcoin was in a very predictable pattern. It was just kind of trading, just moving through a corrective movement. Very straightforward, very predictable, very simple, you could almost say. And then kind of out of nowhere, Bitcoin just has two large red candlesticks on the 10 o'clock hour and on the 11 o'clock hour as this post came out. So I looked around trying to figure out what it was, and sure enough, this is what happened, and it's actually going on over on the stock indices also. So, for example, DJI was at 46,000 points. It's dropped 700 points down into the mid 45s. If you look at the SPY, then there has been a pretty sizable correction here of about 1.7% in about an hour. That's a pretty large correction in a stock index that is valued in the tens of trillions of dollars. That's a few $1 trillion worth of value gone following this Truth Social post. So before we read it, I do want to just go ahead and give another update. We talked about yesterday about how this was going to be a fantastic trade entry, and if we dropped back down to 118,000, then that would be an excellent place to enter into, because you would get a very solid risk-to-reward ratio entry, and it would be a great time to go into an uptrend, go into a long trade. We're going to want to put a pause on that for right now until we understand more so what's going on between Donald Trump, the United States, and President Xi Jinping and China. I almost call it the People's Republic of China, but this is not a republic and it's not for the people, so we're not going to use that term. Anyway, let's go ahead and dive right on into this post found over on Donald Trump's Truth Social post. Truth Social, I will link this specific post in the description down below so that you can read it for yourself. Of course, you can also just pause and look it over. Considering this has impacted the market to the tune of probably about $3 to $5 trillion in the span of an hour, I think we should go ahead and give it the attention that it deserves and read the entire thing. It'll probably take me about 2 minutes to read it, and then we'll break it down. So let's get started. Donald Trump posted, "Some very strange things are happening in China. They are becoming very hostile and sending letters to countries throughout the world that they want to impose export controls on each and every element of production having to do with rare earths and virtually anything else they can think of, even if it's not manufactured in China. Nobody has ever seen anything like this, but essentially it would clog the markets and make life very difficult for virtually every country in the world, especially for China. We have been contacted by other countries who are extremely angry at this great trade hostility, which came out of nowhere. Our relationship with China over the past 6 months has been a very good one, thereby making this move on trade an even more surprising one. I have always felt that they've been lying in wait, and now, as usual, I have been proven right. There is no way that China should be allowed to hold the world captive, but that seems to have been their plan for quite some time, starting with the magnets and other elements that they have quietly amassed into somewhat of a monopoly position, a rather sinister and hostile move, to say the least. When I'm done reading, I'll explain what all of this means. But the U.S. has monopoly positions also, much stronger and far more reaching than China's. I have just not chosen to use them. There was never a reason for me to do so, until now." The letter they sent is many pages long and details with great specificity each and every element that they will want to withhold from that they want to withhold from other nations. Things that were routine are no longer routine at all. I have not spoken to President Xi because there was no reason to do so. This was a real surprise, not only to me, but to all the leaders of the free world. I was to meet President Xi in 2 weeks at APEC in South Korea, but now there seems to be no reason to do so. The Chinese letters were especially inappropriate in that this was the day that, after 3,000 years of bedlam and fighting, there is peace in the Middle East. I wonder if that timing was coincidental. Depending on what China says about the hostile order that they have just put out, I will be forced as president of the United States to financially counter their move. For every element that they have been able to monopolize, we have too. I never thought it would come to this, but perhaps, as with all things, the timing has come. Ultimately, though potentially painful, it will be a very good thing in the end for the United States of America. One of the policies that we are calculating at this time is a massive increase on tariffs on Chinese products coming into the United States of America. There are many other countermeasures. That are likewise under serious consideration. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So I'm going to give you some context about what this means, and then we're going to break it down, how it's going to impact markets, and most importantly, how it's going to impact your portfolio. Because ultimately, I don't think you or I really care about trade between China and the United States. What we do care about is how that affects our daily life. It affects the prices of things on the shelves, and most importantly for us, it affects the price of our Bitcoin and whether or not we should be going into a long trade. So let's break it down. First thing that we need to understand is a little bit of physics. As you guys know, I was going to be an astrophysicist before I dropped out of college to go full-time doing my YouTube channel here. That was my plan since I was 11 years old. I was studying quantum mechanics and astrophysics, string theory, all of it in 6th grade. I have a very strong understanding of the periodic table of elements, so I am probably more qualified to explain this to you than anybody on YouTube. What you need to understand is that there are about 100 different elements. There's really about 92, everything up until about uranium, that appear naturally on the Earth. There's about 92 different elements. Every single one of them is important for a different reason. Hydrogen is used in water. Oxygen is a component of water. Iron we use in steel. You know, we use uranium in nuclear reactors and nuclear bombs, right? These different elements, however, are not dispersed in an even way. And there are a great number of metals that are very, very, very important. You're thinking about your palladiums, you're thinking about your titaniums, you're thinking about, technetium, just different elements like this that are very important in industry. And they're very, 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 very rare in so much as there may only be a few thousand tons to a few tens of thousands of tons of them the world over. So they're very rare, very important, very expensive, and very necessary for most of our modern electronics infrastructure. In your computer, there's all kinds of different elements in there that are extremely rare, and they're only needed in one little place. But if you lose that, then the whole computer doesn't work. And these elements, when they're in the ground, are distributed extremely unevenly. And many of these rare earths, as they're called, rare earth elements, are found in China, and basically China alone. We're like 90% of the entire world's stock of certain elements that are needed in most advanced technology are found only in China. And there are also some other rare earth elements that are found almost exclusively in the United States. And so when you live in a post-Second World War order, where you have two juggernauts, the United States of America and China, that both wield massive nuclear arsenals, then direct and open warfare is off the table because the extinction of the human race would be on the table at that point in time. And so when you have two massive, almost perfectly ideologically opposed nations, they're going to fight. We've got two alphas in the room, and they're going to go at it because they completely disagree with each other about everything. And so they're going to figure out any way that they can fight about this. And one of the ways that China and the United States can fight so that the United States can get ahead or so that China can get ahead is that they can fight over rare earths, because both of them have a great amount of leverage in that area, because China genuinely does have a very strong monopoly. Now, that's the elemental portion of it. We also need to talk about the geopolitical portion of it. Something that you have to understand about China is that China is going through a population crisis right now. Their population has actually peaked and it's been declining, and is going to continue to decline. Their population peaked at about 1.4 billion people. It's already declined closer towards the 1.3 billion people mark, and by 2050 to 2070, it's expected that their population may decline as far as down to 1 billion, down to potentially 800 to 900 million, which would bring them back under a billion mark. So China is at the apex of their power. In the last 5,000 years of Chinese existence, they're one of the oldest nations on the planet in one form or another. They are the strongest that they have ever been in human history. It's not even close, and that is not going to last. Because of the policies of the Chinese of the Communist Party, with the one-child policy, later the two-child policy, birth rates collapsed. The culture shifted away from having a nuclear family and then focusing on actually just building infrastructure and, running an economy. And so the population is collapsing, which means that the Chinese Republic is the Chinese nation, is basically falling apart at the seams. And Xi Jinping understands that he's got about 5 to 10 years to take as much power as he possibly can, because time's running out. And so when you have China in this state where they're extremely strong, but they're also extremely desperate, they're going to use any means possible to get as much power and as much leverage as they can and land grab as quickly as they can, so that they can retain as much power as possible. And so that's where this is coming from. President Xi Jinping understands that the Chinese nation does not have long to use the amount of force that they have right now, because they are just not long for that much force. They don't have the population, they don't have the demographics, they don't have the land, they don't have the natural resources in some cases. They have a lot of rare earths, they're lacking in other things like coal, right? They're lacking in a lot of areas. So they need to kind of they're incentivized to basically take the world on as fast as they possibly can. And so that's really the two kind of areas here. They're fighting over elements because it's an area that they're strong in. They want to fight because they understand that they're losing power. So how does this impact the United States of America? Well, so far, it has obviously led to a major correction on Bitcoin. It's led to a major correction on stocks. Now we're going to kind of look at the market's angle on this. It's led to a major correction because, as we know, tariffs, when they first came out, were extremely scary for the markets. This entire correction, negative 18% on the DJI, was almost completely predicated on the fear of tariffs. And so when Trump used the T word again, markets get freaked out. And Trump is speaking in this post, I mean, I just read it to you, as if this is basically all-out trade war with China, and it's just, as far as it's the nuclear option when it comes to trade. Right? Anyone talking about a shooting war is very much mistaken. That's not something that is being discussed right now. So don't be concerned about this. But this is potentially the largest escalation we've seen in the trade war between the United States of America and between China, possibly ever. And so that is, of course, going to lead to a major correction on the stock market. So let's analyze the impacts of this kind of movement. The first thing that we need to point out is what we cannot really understand. And the first thing that we cannot understand is we cannot understand what China's counter to this Truth Social post is going to be. We do not know what those tariffs are going to be. How large are they going to be? What elements is Trump going to put tariffs on? What are we going to do to counter what China is purportedly doing? Does this letter that China theoretically sent even exist? Are we ever going to see it? Is Trump going to prove that this is something that's actually happening, right? There's a lot of different questions and uncertainty here. And I think that the reason the market is correcting is because of that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, not even just because of the idea of tariffs, although that is a part of it. And so the market is most likely going to have a bearish shadow cast over it until Trump or Xi, one of the two sides, brings some clarity to what's about to happen next. And so I forecast that this weekend you are going to see some bearishness in the market because of the FUD of a massive trade war breaking out between the United States and China, who once again are the two largest economies on planet Earth. And that means that we have to consider that that is more important than technicals right now. So what we're going to see happen is that regardless of what we've talked about with technicals, regardless of what we've talked about with cycles, regardless of what we've talked about with gold and Bitcoin parity, this is going to be a force that is going to act upon the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency market that is alien to everything that we've discussed so far. And we're going to have a few days of data to see how powerful this is. We don't know right now whether or not this is just going to cause a 2% drop market-wide for today, and people are going to forget about it tomorrow, and Trump's not going to say anything else about it. That'd be the most bullish. That'd be the most bullish thing that could happen, is just a return to what we've come to know as normalcy. However, if this escalates, pretty much every time you get any kind of announcement, it's probably going to cause a drop on Bitcoin. How does this impact things? Once again, at the beginning of the video, I front-loaded that because I want to make sure you heard it. That does mean that we have to be more careful about this long entry. It did just make this long entry that we were setting up for, that we were looking for, that we expected to happen over the weekend, more risky. It does increase the downside risk. It does increase the risk that you would get triggered with a stop loss. So take that trade that we talked about yesterday at your own risk, because things have changed over the last 24 hours with Donald Trump's Truth Social post. It's still, technically speaking, a fantastic entry. However, we do have to pump the brakes a little bit and say we don't know what's going on geopolitically. This is a very, very, very big deal, not something that's just going to, be easily swept under the rug. And it is, of course, a bearish deal as well, at least for short-term markets. So what I'm looking for in the short term, to start getting to specifics, is I'm looking for Bitcoin to backtest 118, and I'm really hoping it holds. We have fantastic support there. This was the level of resistance that we hit the day that the FOMC dropped interest rates. This is also the 0.618 Fibonacci level. It is also the visible range volume profile point of control on the 4-hour chart, as you can see right here. right? The point of control is right here at 118. So I would very much be leaning in the direction still of a bounce at $118,000 on the Bitcoin market, and also a bounce relatively soon on the S&P 500. But that is based upon the idea that we don't see much else out of this. If we see another message from Trump, if we see more that is bearish, then that is where we are going to run into this issue of saying we don't know exactly where the bottom is. We do have a CME futures gap down here at 110. We do have other levels of support like 115 and 113 and 112 and 109 that Bitcoin could fall back down and test. But what I can tell you with quite a bit of confidence is that Bitcoin is far, far, far undervalued compared to where it should be. Bitcoin really ought to be trading, I would say, between $150,000 and $200,000. So what this news essentially does in my mind is it kicks the can down the road a little bit on these price targets that we have. It adds some more bearishness to the mix, right? You got a little bit of paint, you add a little bit of blue, it makes a little bit bluer, right? We've got a little bit of bearishness, so it makes the overall picture just a little bit bearish, but a little bit more bearish, but it doesn't stop the fact that we are still in a bull market. It doesn't stop the fact that Bitcoin is still overall extremely bullish. It doesn't change the fundamentals about Bitcoin following gold. It doesn't change the fact that gold is going to most likely rotate out into Bitcoin, and so we want to kind of box this news in. It's not nothing, right? And it's also not the end of the world, but it is kind of right here in the middle where it's like low to medium impact. It's probably not going to stop a bull market. It's almost certainly not going to start a bear market, but it probably will have a small bearish impact over the course of the next week or so as we figure out what's going on. In other words, be a little bit more cautious, maybe keep your stop losses a little bit tighter, maybe ask for a little bit lower of an entry before you go into trades, maybe ask for a little bit more confirmation before you go into a long trade. But overall, I am still bullish on this market. I still do believe that Bitcoin will be rallying up above our major uptrending level of resistance very soon. I believe that Bitcoin will be hitting $130,000, $140,000, and $150,000 within the next 60 days, unless we just see some absolute full-blown massacre going on when it comes to trade. If this doesn't blow up into something massive, then it will almost certainly blow over, and you'll see Bitcoin end up rallying quite a bit. Right now, we're in a holding pattern. I would take a lot more caution than you otherwise probably would have. It's a great time to be, 24 hours ago before this came out, it was a great time to be extremely aggressive with your investments. Right now, it's a time to maybe back off a little bit and just be a little bit more careful, because we want to make sure that at the end of the day, we are calculating our risk to reward. And ultimately, everything that we do on this channel is just to get right back to risk to reward. How much caution do we need to use? We don't want to use too much caution where we don't enter into trades, not too little caution where we just throw caution to the wind, fly by the seat of our pants, and lose our whole portfolio. And we also want to look at our risk. What this does, in my opinion, is it's a mild to moderate increase to the downside risk on Bitcoin, and therefore, to counteract that increased downside risk, what we need to do is we need to ask for a little bit more confirmation, a little bit more time above key levels that are used for confirmation, maybe a little bit higher stop losses, just something to balance the increased risk with increased risk management, and then that will bring our trading and our investing right back into alignment with what is going on the world over. If you're an investor in Bitcoin, this is not a reason to sell your coins. This does not mean that Bitcoin is going to zero. This does not mean that Bitcoin is about to go into a bear market. And this does not mean that a few days ago was the cycle top. That's not what any of this means. At the end of the day, this is one Truth Social post, and if nothing else comes of this, it will be forgotten about by Monday, and we will be right back on track. We will take it one day at a time, because today's troubles are enough for today, as the Lord Jesus once said. And if this does get bigger, then we will play it from that point in time based on the available information. So be looking for long entries, but make sure that you're managing that risk well. If you enjoyed today's video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to see more content like this, make sure to let me know with the link in the description box down below. If you guys have not already signed up for Stamp Seed, you're going to get this awesome hammer. And you know what it does? It literally stamps your seed phrases into a rare earth metal called titanium. And so if you want to get some titanium, it's not really rare. It's not as rare as the others, but it is somewhat rare. You can stamp your seed phrases into titanium. Why would you do that? Well, it's incredibly strong. I mean, a pretty strong guy. Not a chance. Not even close. Nope. That's really strong stuff right there. It's titanium, right? I mean, come on. Iron Man suit, gold, titanium, alloy, you know, it's the whole titanium. It's really important. But it's also very much heat resistant. And that's really the point here, is that it's heat resistant. If your house burns down, you're still going to have your seed phrases. You might lose your house, you got homeowners insurance, but you're not going to lose your Bitcoin. So, Stamp Seed, links down below. Use coupon code JEB15 so they know we sent you, and also you can get 15% off at checkout. If you enjoyed today's video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, stay tuned for more content. I love you, and before I go, I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.